Turning to some international news now, Iceland's prime minister has resigned after his name appeared in the so-called Panama Papers. New revelations in those documents leaked from a Panama-based law firm has sparked anger around the world. The prime minister is accused of hiding money in an offshore account in order to evade taxes.
Britain's Prime Minister David Cameron was mentioned in those documents as well, but he's pushing back on the allegations.
In terms of my own financial affairs, I own no shares. I have a salary as Prime Minister, and I have some savings, which I get some interest from, and I have a house which we used to live in, which we now let out while we're living in Downing Street. And that's all I have. I have no shares, no offshore trusts, no offshore funds, nothing like that. And so that, I think, is a very clear description.
Don Dahler has been covering this story and is here with us now. We're really starting to see reaction around the world when it comes to these Panama Papers. We want to touch on Iceland in a minute, but first, to address David Cameron there, who we heard from, what could we see happen here?
Well, this is really interesting because it's actually David Cameron's father who took some investments and took them offshore with, according to these documents,
and
if they are
no longer alive.
Exactly. But
right.
But if these documents are to be believed, and we'll touch on that in a second here, because more and more it seems like they are, because of a lack of denials on a lot of people who are named in these things. But if they are to be believed, he did that. He moved money offshore, some investments, with the explicit purpose of saving on taxes. Now, why that impacts David Cameron is because he's been very vocal about wanting to open up the transparency of bank operations in Europe. And so this is kind of a little bit of a besmirching of his name, the fact that his own father would partake in this kind of activity.
He's been very vocal.
Yeah, about that stuff.
Yeah.
And although one could argue, look, it's his father's passed away, and he might not even be aware of all the financial details of his father's life. The more interesting question is with regards to Iceland. Prime Minister there has resigned. It makes a scandal. Explain to the viewers exactly what the scandal is there, because it's very different from what we've seen in Britain.
All right. His name is Sigmundur Gunnlaugsson.
Very
I had
good.
to write it down
Nice,
because there are a lot of consonants in there, I think, if you were on Jeopardy. So what he did, according to these documents, and again, he didn't deny it, he resigned. So that lends you to believe that there's some truth to these allegations. He's accused of hiding millions of investments from his country's failing banks.
There was a huge banking crisis in Iceland a couple of years ago.
He put some of those investments offshore, and then, to exacerbate this, he sold his share of those investments to his wife for $1 a day before a law was to be enacted, which would force officers of the government to reveal such holdings. So it looked like a very deliberate act of obfuscation on his part.
Well, and it's interesting because he ran on the platform that he would be transparent and go after these same types of people.
Right.
Ugh. Okay, so Ukraine's president also under scrutiny for registering a shell company. Why is his case so alarming?
Well, because again, what has shaken the world right now is that these aren't all the normal bad actors that we think of, the Muammar Gaddafis and the Hosni Mubaraks and the drug dealers and the terrorist organizations. These are some people who are actually considered U.S. allies, including Poroshenko. And the reason why this particular allegation is so shocking is that he's accused of moving a fortune from his candy business to the British Virgin Islands in 2014. At the same time that his soldiers were dying in the streets during a Russian incursion there, when his country could have used the tax revenues from these millions. And these documents say that he was moving it there. So there's some question as to whether he's going to have to call for new elections, he'll be impeached, but the repercussions are just beginning.
Are we expecting, Don, to see any kind of investigation? I mean, clearly the United States has to take the lead on this, because if it doesn't, then this sort of just all goes by the wayside, it almost feels like.
You know what's really interesting? As these documents continue to become unveiled every day, practically, we're getting new information. Today, the glut of information is not so much about these wealthy world leaders who are hiding money for various reasons. It's about the sanction busting that's going on out there. You have Syria being able to circumvent them. Bank Russia in Russia, which was under sanctions, able to still move money over there. And North Korea able to move money around. So the world bodies, the EU, the UN, and the U.S. are taking a look at that and saying, how can we stop this? The Department of Justice says they're keeping an eye on these things, but already in half a dozen, if not more, countries, there are serious investigations going on right now.
Wow.
All right, Don Dahler, thank you so much for breaking it down for us. Appreciate it.